Horror games are everywhere on Kickstarter, but there are only a few that are actually themed around Halloween. You'd think the second spookiest holiday in the world would inspire some interesting gameplay designs, but that hasn't been the case. Why is that? Where are the Halloween games? Where are the games about carving jack-o'-lanterns and putting on cheap Walmart costumes at the age of 23 and going door to door hoping for candy, but only getting shitty looks from crotchety old people before going to a Halloween party and eating so much candy you vomit on the shoes of a girl you have a crush on? That is the true spirit of Halloween. Halloween games in general aren't really much of a thing. Maybe the best examples are Double Fine's Costume Quest and the movie adaptation of Halloween on the Atari 2600. Outside of those two, there's not much else, except for the obvious example I'm inevitably forgetting. Anyway, I think the themes of Halloween would make a great game if anybody could be bothered. Unfortunately, Kickstarter hasn't yet brought us any wonderful ideas either, but there are at least a handful of Halloween-related games there. Indiegogo might have a few too, but trying to find a specific game on there is an exercise in tedious frustration, a lot like watching any of my videos. So we're going to focus on Kickstarter today. Gotta have something for next year anyway, right? I already did an episode of Kicked on Haunted Halloween in last week's award-winning episode, so you can go check it out there. It's basically an NES side-scrolling brawler that's actually being developed on the NES. It's a sequel to Haunted Halloween 85, believe it or not, so you can go right ahead and add that to the list of Halloween games too if you want. The only other successful game is Devil's Bluff, funded in May 2015 and released in October of that year. The game takes place at a mansion during a Halloween costume party in which people are being killed one at a time, Agatha Christie style. It's an isometric multiplayer game where you have to survive and figure out who the killer is. There's some really fun dynamics built around the multiplayer aspect, such as being partnered with somebody and having to sneak around and eavesdrop on other partners to hear what they're saying, and apparently literal slapstick combat. Other than the Halloween costume party though, this one doesn't really have much to do with Halloween, so we'll be moving on. Besides those two, the list becomes about as appealing as an apple on Halloween that has a mysterious razor blade shaped slit in the side. That's pretty harsh even for me, actually. Mini Golf Halloween theme for Unity game is perhaps my favorite example. I especially like the aborted attempt at creating a swastika as the thumbnail image. What does this have to do with Halloween? Well, as far as I can tell, it takes place at night, and there's a full moon. And that's it. Mini Golf Halloween theme for Unity game, full 18 holes with lightning, full moon, etc. Hopefully online by October 2013. Have to make at least 50 3D models, like pumpkins, witches, etc. Oh, there are at least pumpkins and witches, so that's something at least. Maybe you can play golf against a witch and the ball will look like a pumpkin? Oh, maybe the ball will actually be a pumpkin. That would make mini golf at least tolerable. But yes, as the date suggests, this is actually a pretty old campaign. It lasted 3 freaking months from February 2013 before failing with just $110 that April. There was a single update in March, which is actually kind of sad, really. Actually, I have contacted a friend who has made 3D models already for this project. I too have made a few models already, including rats, cats, pumpkins, spiders, and a circular saw rip blade. Hopefully we get more backers to get this project going. Thanks, smiley face, Mitch. On to the real Kickstarter games now, yeah? Like the 31st by developer Eric Lingiel. Eric, who is the founder of Terrathon Software and apparently created his own game engine, the Tombstone engine specifically for this game. He launched this campaign twice, once in April 2015 and again in October 2015. You'd think the extended time would give him a chance to improve the game, you know, develop more of it and have something totally new to show the second time around. You'd also be wrong, because that didn't happen. The second campaign is nearly identical to the first, save for the order of some of the sections talking about levels and weapons and that kind of thing, and some, emphasis on some, of the wording. The pitch video, which is the only thing that shows any gameplay, is exactly the same though. The 31st would have been a humorous first-person shooter full of endless hordes of bloodthirsty monsters and wacky situations. The game is not just about mindlessly killing all the creatures of the night, the page reads. It also offers a sizable element of treasure hunting and exploration as you learn more about the mysteries left behind by people who visited before you. The page also promises levels that are big. They really mean that, don't you know? But don't really specify what that means. One person's big is another person's flaccid, so the developers really could have done with giving an estimated game runtime or showing us some of the levels. They do go into quite a lot of detail about those levels later in the page, though. You could say that about the entire Kickstarter page. There's a section for the backstory, the main plot, the enemies, the weapons, power-ups, the levels, who the developers are, what the money is for, and a massive risks and challenges section. The 31st has all the sides of a Kickstarter run by a developer that really has nothing to show, only ideas to talk about. That's not necessarily a bad thing. And in this case, Eric, or Terrathon Software, or whatever he wants to go by, does have the pitch video gameplay and some 3D models, so there is at least something there. But the best way to pitch a game on Kickstarter is to show, don't tell. It's all well and good that you've written a game bible the size of War and Peace, but if you don't have any coherent, good-looking, or at least promising gameplay to show, it won't matter. Not on Kickstarter anyway. This could be a good game, but the developers didn't give backers enough information to make that determination, and that's why both campaigns failed. And now we immediately skip to not only this year, but this month. That's how few Halloween-themed Kickstarters there are. Two have gone up in the last few weeks in the form of Mindless Box and Creekside Creep Invasion. I wrote about both on Clickus.com, which you can go read about now, but I feel I was a little too negative with them. Let me take this opportunity to instead issue more constructive criticism, since it seems neither campaign will make it. Mindless Box has a promising concept. It's a dating game visual novel, which are just everywhere on Kickstarter, but this one is a bit different. Here's how the page describes the game. Mindless Box started as a response to popular otome and shoujo tropes, lines, and characters. It has since expanded to a game examining the struggles of teenagers growing up with no guidance, as well as the consequences of choices we make believing them to be good. Rather than Emily stroke the player taking a backseat to their stories, many of the choices in each route will require careful thought. Simply going with the answer that seems to please the route choice the most won't always work. It may be best to think of what Emily wants and what will benefit them both. There are a lot of visual novels that have dialogue options in them, but 9 times out of 10 those options do nothing but decide which hunky guy or busty, questionable teenage girl you'll be rubbing genitals with. That's still the case in Mindless Box, but your actions will also affect the story itself. You play as Emily, a witch in training at a magic school that most certainly is not Hogwarts, who is conducting an experiment against school rules in a broom closet, when you bring the roof down with your funky spell. Emily then has to take up work as a janitor at the school to pay for repairs, and from there your actions will decide the fate of humanity. Or, Emily's schoolwork and relationship status, same thing. The problem is twofold. First, just like with the 31st, there's not a clear example of what the developers are talking about. We can only take their word for it that the gameplay is deep and exciting, as there isn't any real footage or real screenshots to back it up. Second, the game itself doesn't look good. There are character descriptions on the Kickstarter page written in this terrible font on striped backgrounds, each with different colors. I've got pretty good eyesight, but even I struggle to read most of these. Unfortunately, this background and font choice carries over to the game too. It's a pretty big problem when you can't read text in any game, but in a visual novel that renders the game unplayable. The rest of the game doesn't look much better. There are screenshots on the Kickstarter that just look awful. The perspective is skewed, there's too much going on in the backgrounds, the use of color doesn't follow any consistent palette, and they're just all so muddy looking. Now, to be fair, the screenshots are from 2014, and the developers say they're already being reworked. If that's the case, then what are they doing here? If it doesn't represent how the game looks, don't show it. You can show a before and after, that would be great. It would demonstrate how the game used to look before you had any funding, while also showing us a final product that we can help bring to life. But simply showing old, unrepresentative screenshots is just a bad idea, because they don't look very good. As for Creekside Creep Invasion, well, I'll just quote myself from the article, shall I? You play as a kid on a Halloween night who wakes up to find all the adults are gone. He climbs out of bed and finds various monsters have taken over. So he has to use a variety of randomly generated weapons to fight these randomly generated enemies in randomly generated levels. There's a leveling system on top of the usual roguelike elements, as well as various costumes that give you different abilities. The game seems to be well put together on a technical level, and the Kickstarter page is well laid out with details and plenty of screenshots of gameplay. The problem I had was the gameplay itself. Again, I was a bit mean, but I think I might be saying something a lot of people are thinking, as evidenced by this particular campaign only collecting $146 of its $10,000 goal. You'd think one of these days the zombie well would dry up, yet somehow the gaming world keeps churning out 8-bit pixel art game after randomly procedurally generated game after crafting survival game after the undead shufflers. Oh sorry, Creekside Creep Invasion calls them creepers, that's totally something different. It has all the hallmarks of an indie game you've come to expect. An 8-bit pixel art style, randomly generated everything, and roguelike elements. It's the indie game equivalent of recent Medal of Honor games. Take everything currently popular and put them in a blender. It even borrows heavily from Double Fine's Costume Quest, a game that is now 6 years old. Everyone feels differently when it comes to innovation, especially on Kickstarter. I talked before about the weaponization of nostalgia, as I call it, and how Kickstarter games intentionally design themselves to evoke retro gaming, either to benefit the campaign and grab a market, or simply because retro games are easier to make. Not that there's anything wrong with that. There comes a point when a game is too retro, too busy following the leader to do anything of merit on its own, and I think that's the problem here. Look at any screenshot of the game. When you see it, you instantly think of retro games, sure, but mostly recent games using this retro trick. Games like Hotline Miami, Super Meat Boy, maybe a bit of The Binding of Isaac, and Hyper Light Drifter as well. And that's not to mention the more contemporary games Creekside Creep Invasion borrows from as well, like the aforementioned Costume Quest. Now maybe you don't have a problem with this, maybe you think it's totally okay for a game to take every idea it has from other games. And you'd be right, that's totally fair. But for a game to succeed on Kickstarter, to leave any kind of lasting legacy, it has to do something different. It has to have some kind of hook to grab people's attention. Simply trying to be other games isn't enough, even if your game is technically well manufactured. Without that, it feels soulless, lifeless, put together by marketers who know nothing about what gamers actually want. But hey, what do I know? Maybe these two games look amazing to you and you're going to back them both right now. Knock yourself out. Just know that it doesn't look like either of them are going to make their funding goal with less than a couple of weeks to go. And that's a great shame. If both of these campaigns fail, it would mean twice as many Halloween-themed Kickstarters would have failed than have found success. And that's not right, damn it. We need to step up and make our own Kickstarter. That's it, folks. Coming next year, Clickus will be unleashing their own Halloween game, Night of the Living Crowd. Fund. Yeah, we're still working on that. That's not true, of course, but what is true is that you can support us anyway on Patreon. It really is a great shame there aren't more Halloween-themed games. I think any game that can pull off the theme well would be really fun, but I guess we're gonna have to stick with Costume Quest and Haunted Halloween 86 whenever that comes out.